You're listening to the Galaxy Poet Podcast, a new digital platform centered around art, the creative process, and creative solutions to problems facing our world. I am your host, Jordan Ferreira. Let's begin. Welcome to episode 12 of the Galaxy Poet Podcast. I'm incredibly excited and proud to say that my guest today is the incredibly talented and prolific actor Bill Oberst Jr., who I think is one of the most illuminating people to speak on the entertainment industry that I've certainly ever heard. And I think it's going to be incredibly inspiring and useful for anyone who may be aspiring in any artistic medium, whether to be a filmmaker, to be an actor, a musician, a poet, whatever it is. So I want to welcome the incredibly versatile and talented Bill Oberst Jr. and say thank you.
Jordan, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do with the podcast, too, because I can tell just from our brief email exchange that you speak to your viewers as if they are intelligent adults, and that's something of a rarity, so thank you.
That's incredibly kind, sir. Thank you. And I sincerely mean it when I say your series of interviews with Film Courage, which was my introduction to you, actually, that's some of the most illuminating, like authentic, real talk about the entertainment industry that I've ever heard. So I feel like it's so nice to see someone who's actually speaking honestly and openly about, hey, you know, when you're an actor and you're moving to Los Angeles, you know, it's important to be aware of, you know, people like having their ego stroked, and you can't say certain things, and you kind of have to be a certain, you know, you just have to be aware that it's not all about the talent. You know what I mean?
It's not about the talent at all. It's just not about you. Whoever you are, it's never about you. It's only about the other people. It's an extremely needy business made up of needy, wounded people, myself included.
Wow.
I remember being at this red carpet, and you know, one of the things you say in LA is, "Oh, you've lost weight." That always, no matter, I think 1,000 years from now, that'll work. So I saw an actress I worked with, and I really liked, and I said, "Oh my God, you look amazing. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I think you've lost weight." And she was like, "Oh yeah." So her boyfriend was there, who's also in the business, and he gave me this hurtful look, and he was like, "I've lost a little too." And I was like, wow. "Oh, damn it. I forgot to stroke you."
Wow.
Like, right? I was stroking her and I forgot to stroke you. So you need many hands. You need tentacles for all the stroking.
Wow. You know, that, I have to say, like, that was the one thing when I first moved to LA to pursue a career as a musician. That was one thing I perhaps was a bit naive about, because I had this view of, if I were to move to LA and just prove to people in positions of power that I have the ability to generate, you know, money for them, that'll be what it takes, right? And I moved here and I'm like, oh my God, that is not.
Well, and in a small market, it would be true in a small market, but right. In a market like LA, no matter what you can do, thousands of people can do that.
Right.
So what it comes down to relationships. It's just if given some level of talent and that you're professional, if you just, you know, given that, then it boils down to relationships, and the people who work are the people with the relationships.
Wow.
I get a lot of work just from not being a bitch. I get a lot of work. In fact, I sometimes think most of my work, because I have producers who will call me. And most of my work is word of mouth now, knock on wood. But producers will call me and they'll say, "Look, you know, I got this role. I got a lot of difficult people already on this set. I just need somebody to come in and do the shit."
Wow.
And they know that I'll come and I won't complain. And, you know, I'll be good for production. I'll do the marketing afterwards. And so, yeah, that's my main role. My main rule is don't be a bitch.
Wow. And one of the aspects of that interview that you gave, or I've tried to scour the internet for all the interviews that I could you know, listen to on you and watch as much of your work as I could in preparation for this. But one of the things you said that I was stuck on was, in the life of an actor, I mean, the acting is maybe 1% of the work that you do, right? Everything else is marketing, everything else is networking. Could you speak a little bit as to that? Because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's the same in the music business. I'd be interested to hear from you afterwards when I answer this. But um, your work in my business only exists if you promote it. Otherwise, you fall into the abyss. Um, Before it was the drive-in, which was better than the digital abyss. Digital abyss, you're really gone, man. You're just boom, it's gone.
Yeah.
So the way that you add value to yourself as an actor, but the only reason people will hire you for anything above scale, and if you're not working above scale, you're not going to make it. But the only way you make above scale is to add value to the production. So you can add value in various ways. You can bring along a huge fan base, or you can be sleeping with the producer, but that's only temporary. But you can add value through understanding that marketing is everything to an independent film. So
Right.
that's what I try to do, to let them know that I'll be their partner from the moment I sign the contract until I die, because the film is around forever. And then there's the preparation. You have a role. I got a shoot. It's just a couple days coming up in a few weeks, but I got to start breaking down the script and going through. And that doesn't mean just learning the lines. That means the secret is that most actors, when they accept a role, they don't read the whole script.
Right.
They only read their part. That's a
Right.
well-kept secret. So
I've
same for
heard
me.
that.
I'll skim everybody else, but I'm like, oh, that's my guy.
Right.
So now I've got to go back and read that script several times until I really understand the universe, and then start understanding my character. So all of that preparatory work, and then getting on set and being willing to wait 8 hours to say two lines, or being told, we're not using you today, come back tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah, it's only like 1% that you actually get to do the acting.
Wow. I mean, I think that's so important for people who want to be artists to hear, because that's not something that was ever told to me before I moved to LA, or that, and I wish it was. Not that it would have stopped me, but it would have put me a little more on guard as to, like, oh wow, this is not a business where you just do art. Like, to be an artist is to also be kind of like
Yeah,
a
I
marketer, you
hear
know?
actors sometimes will say, I just want to work. I
Right.
just want to work. But no one will see your work if you don't do this.
Wow.
Not that we're promoting overtly here, but that's what I've been doing all morning, is interviews for a film that's coming out,
Right.
and thinking about how can I promote the project itself and the other people who are in it, and the producers and the crew, who in this film besides myself can I praise and lift up, because then the whole project comes up.
Right.
It's a really different mindset than, hey, I'm in a movie, look at me, which doesn't work.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm fascinated by the parallels there between, the world of film, which I admit, I've only gotten glimpses of, and I'm a fan of, and but I don't have any practical, like, experience in that world, to music, where I have seen, some of these things that we're talking about, and how ego and pride and insecurity kind of permeate the aspect and the fabric of everything, every choice that you make, right, and every social interaction. Um, in your opinion, is it common for, let's say, an actor to be in a situation where maybe they're working with a company, or they're working with, let's say, a studio, and it's almost like their job day to day is appeasing the ego of their superiors? Is that common? Because I noticed that with music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't want to say yes,
It's okay.
but but it is
Wow.
true, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because, as I say, it's a business of wounded people, and everybody is trying to deal with some psychic wound,
Mm.
and everybody needs something. It's not just because they're needy and they want to be mean to you. It's because everybody has some wound,
Yeah.
and so that's what you're dealing with. And if you're quiet on set and you keep your eyes open, you will learn. The makeup department has someone in it who feels that they aren't respected. How can I respect them? Same with camera. There's someone who feels that their contribution is never recognized, so forth and so forth. So forth. Yeah, you really are. And I'm the same way because I want to be the good boy because I was raised to follow the rules and do a good job. And I want to be told that I did a good job. I don't need to be praised to say, you're the best boy ever, but I want to be the good boy on set. So
Right.
my need on set is for someone, and it can be just nonverbal, just to give me a well done. You're part of the team. Everything's okay. And that can be just as much as, okay, good, Bill.
Right.
So I'm needy too. Yeah, absolutely.
But I feel like the confounding thing for me is that I notice when that well, like when that is the requirement or when that's something that you're looking for, to me that's totally normal, especially if you're talented as you are. I mean, it's totally, reasonable to just, be made to feel like you're part of the team, as you say. That's awesome. But when it goes beyond, when it's like you need, every day, I need to be reminded that I'm a genius. I've been around that and it's not fun.
There is that, isn't
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Um, but again, you want to play or not.
Mm.
That's what it comes down to is who's the gatekeeper and what are the required, what does the gatekeeper need?
Yeah.
And am I willing to provide it? Can I, in good faith, provide it? Is there a good reason to provide it? To make some artistic statement that I really want to make, and how much will it really cost me to, you know, play that sort of game? Because I understand what you're talking about. Now you're beyond the basic human need. You're just someone who absolutely wants to be the king or the queen and
Yeah.
wants you to bow and scrape every day. Yeah, that can be a little rough, but sometimes you got to play.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just I had these ideas that perhaps film was it was I had suspicions it was similar, but my feeling has always been that it's more difficult because as we were talking about a little bit before we started, my view is that it's more difficult for an actor just because you cannot be autonomous. The artistic medium is too big. Like you're dependent upon the other actors, the material, the writer, like the cinematographer. Music you can. If you play an instrument, if you have your friends around you and you build this little community, it's a little bit easier to me.
That's right. So all you can do as an actor is develop your bag of camera tricks and your on-camera brand, and everybody has an on-camera brand, even if they don't want to. You develop things that you can do well on camera that nobody else does, the way the camera likes to see your soul. And that's all you can do. And then hope that people will say, hey, Jordan, I want to hire you because there's this thing you do really well. And I want you to do it in my movie, which sometimes happens, but sometimes they miss the point entirely.
Sure.
Like if you're I happen to be associated with horror. I guess it would be the same for rom-com or any genre. And sometimes people will just make a generic judgment of like, oh, he's horror, so he would be a really good evil killer. So I'm going to hire him to be an evil killer.
Right.
But that's not really what I do. What I do is a wounded monster. And it's a little more nuanced sort of creepiness. But, beggars can't be choosers sometimes.
Right.
So you take it. But yeah, as an artist, if I were a musical artist, I would be able to create the wounded monster and do an entire, musical exploration of it. But I can't. I'm dependent on people giving me those roles.
Right. And the makeup artist and I mean the whole team around that production. You need it.
That's
It's
right.
necessary.
And sometimes we talked about stroking people's egos. You really have to pick your battles, but there are moments where, as an actor, because you have such limited autonomy, you have to be willing to make a stand.
Right.
I was on a television show, and there was an issue with my hair, and I had a really strong feeling about it, and made the decision to go to the director and ask if he could override what the network hair person wanted to do with my hair. It sounds silly, but it was really important to the character.
Sure.
The director said, okay, but it caused hard feelings with the hair person. But it was worth it because it allowed me that bit of autonomy that was really important for that character, I thought. you have so little of it that there are moments when you want to fight for it, but you really have to pick it, because if you do that too much, then you become the bitch and
Right.
nobody wants to hire you.
Right. And I understand that. That's yeah. It's a kind of a plausible place to come at if you're a producer and you're like, oh God, not that guy again. Like I get it.
Exactly right. So you never want to
Yeah.
complain. Um, you never want to be the one who complains,
Sure.
and you don't want to talk to other actors even complaining, because it's a competitive business and they'll go tell someone else, oh, guess what Bill said.
Yeah.
So I really, really have become a fan of just kind of being in your own world on set, and staying quiet and speaking when spoken to when I have to.
Yeah. That I think that's great advice. That's great advice, especially in an atmosphere that's as you say, competitive as entertainment in general. I mean, really, things get around like that pretty quickly, I feel like. And
You bring something up to mind, and I want to ask you if it's this way in music. I used to think that if you want to shine in a scene, you try to steal the scene, but it's completely flipped now. Is experience on some, like, I don't know, 197 projects or something, have led me to believe that if I want to shine, I have to give the scene away. And if I give the scene away to my co-performers, that will make the scene shine. And the whole scene has more energy than it would if I just tried to shine. Is that,
wow,
do you agree with that? Or is that in any way been your experience in music?
that's such a great question. I think there is a lot to that in in certain in certain musical situations. I can see, like, for example, if it's a section where you're the vocalist, right, and it's the vocal should in theory be the highlight, but it in reality it's like it's the communication or the interplay between the rhythm and the vocals and the production that make that moment special. So it's really, yes, the vocal I suppose is meant to be the highlight, but without the accompaniment it's not special. So I relate to that in a lot of ways.
If, if you give your eyes to your scene partners, I mean, really, to give your eyes is to give your soul. We don't look much in each other's eyes in our culture because of that. It's invasive and it's offering a lot of yourself. But if you do that for your other performers, and I'll be honest, a lot of people don't do it in return. But if you do it, it seems to feed them and it elevates everything.
Wow.
When someone will give me their eyes, it's like manna from heaven. It's just amazing because it happens so rarely, but it does help the scene.
Do you mean in scenes actors won't often like look you in your eye?
Not often. I mean, you do technical things like you look in the camera eye.
Right.
If lens is here, then I'm going to look, as close to the lens as I can. You look in the camera eye that's closest to the lens, or they might focus just on your pupil or on a spot here. So it looks like they're looking in your eye, but very rarely is there real searching connection where I don't know how to explain it. You can be looking in someone's iris and not looking in their eyes because they're not giving them to you.
Wow, I see.
Somehow there's a shade that can be pulled down emotionally, and you
Right.
just feel it that there's nothing there. So I have to operate on my emotional sense memory, which is cool. I mean, it's fine. That's why you do the work and have this emotional sense memory. But when you've got all that built up and then somebody unexpectedly gives their eyes to you during a scene, it can make for something really, really great.
Yeah, it would seem so. I'm surprised that I thought the whole art form of acting was sort of predicated on connection, and eye contact is one of the most powerful things you can do for
Yeah,
connection.
but
So it surprises.
it's predicated on connection, Jordan, but it's not connection with other people. It's connection with myself and my psychic
Oh,
wounds, the things
wow.
that are wrong in me. The reason
Right.
that people become actors is to delve into themselves. So essentially, it's a selfish occupation. We only tolerate other people in the scene because they have to be there or we can't explore ourselves. right?
Right. That makes sense. That
That's
makes sense.
yeah, that's a not a very flattering truth about actors, but I think it's true.
So speaking of that, like I'm curious to find out who were some actors that maybe you watched growing up that maybe put the idea in your mind, like I would really love to do this. Was there some performance or some film that really kind of inspired you?
Yeah, Michael Caine was a contemporary actor in my day when I was coming up, and an older actor, a silent film actor named Lon Chaney, inspired me greatly as a child. I was a monster kid. I felt like a monster myself, and so I identified with monsters. And I read magazines about old monster movies that existed long before I was born. And there was no VCR then, no internet, nothing. So I wouldn't have ever known these people existed without the magazines.
Right.
So I read about an actor named Lon Chaney and films that he had done. So the local Masonic Lodge one Halloween had they were showing old silent, scary movies, I think they called it, in a church basement, showing them on a sheet with a 16 millimeter projector, somebody playing the piano. And I begged my grandmother to take me because they were showing Nosferatu, 1922, and Phantom of the Opera, 1925, with Lon Chaney. And she's like, "Oh, you don't want to see this." I said, "Oh, please, please, man." So she took me, and Nosferatu was great. I really loved it. But then Phantom, there's this scene where his mask is ripped away, and it's become a cliche. But in the original, he reacts unexpectedly. The silent actor Lon Chaney, there's not just anger, you did what I didn't want you to do. There's real pain and hurt that you had to see my ugliness. You had to see, didn't you? It wasn't enough for you to know that I was damaged goods, but you had to take a good look in the bright light. You had to wheel me around and say, my God, look how repulsive you are. And all of that is implied in his look, his gesture. It's a look of hurt, anger, rage, all at once. And I'll never forget seeing it for the first time. And I knew I have a lot of that in me, and I want to do this. I want to do this on stage, on film, some way. I need to say for myself what this actor is saying right now for this character. It gives me chills really just to think about it.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's a powerful moment. I mean, that's wow. That's it's interesting that you say that because I often am reminded of certain performers, whether it be like Klaus Kinski, who later did the Nosferatu film, or like maybe more contemporary actor who's one of my favorites, Gary Oldman. And some of the work that you do, like there's a tenacity, there's a fierceness, there's a commitment to explore the depths and dimension of that character that maybe aren't popular, but they're real. And I always love that in any performer. So, I have to congratulate you on quite a lot of phenomenal work.
feast your eyes, curse, feast your eyes, glut your soul on my accursed ugliness. That's what
Wow.
Eric says. Um, and that's the
Wow.
way I feel too, because I was always ashamed of myself. I was ashamed of my face. I was ashamed of my body. I was ashamed of who and what I was. Um, and so acting both on stage and in film has allowed me to say, feast your eyes. Humanity can not only be the things you see in the glossy magazines, it can be this.
Wow.
Um, so that's the drive.
That is the sense I get from your work, and I think that's the mark of an artist, and that's why I wanted to speak to you. And I feel like it's invigorating for me who I'm not a working actor, I'm not a director or anything, but I watch that and it kind of inspires me. It inspires me to think about my own craft and how I can apply that kind of fierceness to maybe something new that I'm writing, or performance, or some aspect of that. So yeah,
I love things in a minor key.
me too. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So things can be in a minor key that aren't just musical, right?
Yeah.
And there's a subset of people who relate to things in a minor key, and I guess through the people, if there are people who like what I do, it's those people.
Would you ever consider directing, or are you more in the actor space of like?
I flatter myself to think that I know how to direct, but I would like to give it a go. I've seen enough of it. It seems to consist a lot of times of asking for one extra shot and the AD saying no. So you just have to learn. Okay, yeah, I'd like to give it a go. You know?
I see. To me, that I mean, of course, you're a phenomenal actor, but I think that outlet would be so fascinating to see from someone like yourself, where, as you say about the Phantom of the Opera performance, like there's implied nuances of like of not just rage, but like all this pathos, and I think you could maybe express that through that form. That I would love to see it. I'd be first in line.
I would like to do that. I would. People say, "Oh, he's an actor's director," which usually for an actor means they don't push me. So I don't know if I'd be an actor's director in that way because I have strong ideas in my own performances. If I don't believe one moment, the whole thing's ruined for me.
Right.
And I kick myself because I didn't believe that moment. There are things I can't watch because there's one unbelievable moment. Um, so yeah, I would be, I'm afraid, one of those directors that just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going until you're exhausted and you say, what in the hell do you want from me? And that's where you can really start working. I've never done anything worthwhile that didn't involve exhaustion and physical and emotional um, wringing out and discomfort. It's always hard and grueling, or it's not good.
I relate to that. And also in terms of film, like the directors who are often criticized for taking that approach, whether it be David Fincher or, obviously Stanley Kubrick or someone like that, I think those are always the filmmakers who I look to and I say, well, I mean, those films are immortal because of it. He obviously, or the director was chasing a vision and they achieved it. I mean, you watch A Clockwork Orange or 2001: A Space Odyssey or Seven. I mean, these are like visual masterworks, in my opinion. And it's because of that, you know?
Well, am I lying to you right now? The only way that you can tell is to look in my eyes. And it's the same way for an audience. There's something instinctive in a human that makes us sense this isn't true. This is bullshit. I think we all have really strong bullshit detectors. And if you don't believe what you see in the frame, you just have to do it again until you believe it. I have coached some actors for auditions, and if you don't believe it, you just say, I don't believe it. And they'll do it again. And they'll say, well, what should I be doing differently? And I say, you should be telling the truth.
Wow.
That's all it comes down to is you should be telling the truth. And if you can't find that truth within you, don't do it.
Right. And that goes to the subtext of even the words that are being spoken, right? Just the truth internally, externally.
That's right. And physical. I
Physical.
love body horror within my own genre because I like the idea of the body being a trap, a prison, a thing of terror, as well as a thing of beauty and wonder. And you have to give your whole body to that sort of performance, and so your body has to be truthful as well, even though you're freezing and it's very late and you're almost delusional from lack of sleep and all of those things. Your body still has to tell the truth. So the only way to do that, because when you're exhausted, you can't pretend. You know what I mean? Like if you're with your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, and it's really late and you try to lie, you're going to get caught because you can't do it. You just don't have the energy.
Right.
So when you're that exhausted, the only way to tell the truth is just to allow the truth in, so it becomes your truth, and you're no longer pretending. And that's when the lens sees the truth.
I think there's a lot to that. I'm fascinated by this because I so rarely hear people talk about this. But those directors, whether Darren Aronofsky or all these people who are notorious for pushing actors, I mean, at the moment where they're most uncomfortable, like you just said, like that is when the truth the truth happen, or maybe it's just they get to a point beyond their comfort zone where things that are unexpected happen that are reflections of truth.
That's right.
Perhaps that's it. Do you relate to that in some way with your own work?
Yes, that's exactly right. You just have to let it in. You can't pretend. And that's why actors who, kind of stay to themselves on set and stay in their own head, people will look at you like, oh, who they think they are. But you have to be either hot or cold. You can't be one or the other. You can't have a foot in both worlds. You
Right.
cannot be on your phone on Facebook 5 seconds before the take and be anywhere near the truth. You can't. You've got to be in that truth so that it becomes your truth. And you'll know that it has become your truth when you have no interest in Facebook. You don't want to text. And if somebody wants to chat with you or gossip, you're not really interested because that's no longer your world. You've left them. You've left that world. It's not yours anymore. And you're happy.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's true. That's where the art that has the most energy and magic and kind of wonderment that's from people who are channeling something other than the superficial. I completely agree. What are some performances of your own that you can watch and look at and recognize like as being works of like authentic truth and that you're proud of, or like are there a few standout moments or performances?
There's the serial killer on Criminal Minds. And that's in part because he was, the look of him was an homage to Lon Chaney.
Oh
Sort
wow.
of a crippled, hunched over, physically deformed person who does really heinous things, a wounded monster. I can look at that performance. I can look at a performance on a film like Dis, which is a small art house extreme horror film. And we shot in Mexico. I can look at that because it was the most physically grueling role I've ever done. It was so hard and so cold and so wet and so miserable. But because of that, I think I can look at the work. So, yeah, it tends to be stuff like that. In the non horror realm, I did a film called The Retrieval, which is a coming of age story set in the American Civil War. I play a bounty hunter for enslaved people. And again, it was really hard. This time, not physically, but because the director wanted stillness in the frame, which at that time I wasn't willing or skilled at, willing to do or skilled at. And at one point, he took me to the side and he said, "What do I have to hit you with to make you be still in my frame? Because I'll find it and I'll hit you."
Wow.
And I knew he would. And so I
Wow.
had to learn something that was very hard for me on that film, The Retrieval, to be absolutely still in the frame. I mean, he wanted nothing but eyes. And I thought, he's making a huge mistake. This is going to be so boring. And then I saw the film on the big screen with audiences about 6 times, and each time people cried. And I thought, the director knows what he's doing.
Wow.
So, back just like our previous conversation, it's the films and the TV shows and the performances that have some difficulty to them. Those are the
Yeah.
ones that are worthwhile.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing, man. It makes a lot of sense, right? It makes a lot of sense that eye contact and connection and communication, non-verbally and stillness could exude power in such a large scale, medium, like seeing a film up on the big screen and seeing moments of stillness. I could see how that would be powerful.
The,
You know?
the loss of the big screen has been a loss for film,
Yeah.
hasn't it?
Yeah.
Because the whole idea was that you would be looking at larger than life mythic depictions of humanity, and now it's become palm sized. And
Yeah.
it's so strange that it started out really small, with these little viewing screens that you'd look through like this and side carnival sideshows. And
Right.
we've gone back to that now.
Wow. I've never thought about it in that way, but that's true. That is true. What do you think is the like with this pandemic sort of rewriting so many of the norms of entertainment and distribution and film particularly, Like, what do you think the future is going to look like in terms of theatrical releases, theatrical distribution? Like, what is your take on that?
Spielberg was right, although he said it before the pandemic, that movie theaters will eventually become only for the big attractions, and movie tickets will cost a lot more even than they do now, because you'll be paying for the elevated experience, up in the stratosphere of going to an actual movie. Most of it'll be on devices like this, like we're communicating on now, which is really good for independent producers, right? I
Sure.
mean, because there's such a demand for content. So it's a good thing. I guess it's only a loss for cinema as an art form. You just have to find a way to do it on a smaller scale. Um, but yeah, movie theaters, forget it. I mean, still, of course, it's everybody's dream to be on the big screen, but we should really all move past that.
Yeah, I think that's a very healthy, like, contemporary way of seeing it because even before COVID, I mean, I remember asking myself going to the cinema and saying, like, this reminds me, this reminds me of independent music venues before before they like go out of business and like how much longer is this really going to last? But I love it. Selfishly, it's like I wish it didn't go away because I love, you know?
Yes, me too. I can relate to that, to independent music. Um, there were independent theaters. It used to be, even 20 years ago, there were independent theaters which would show, foreign films or second run films or strange, odd things. I loved those things, and I mourn their loss, but the culture moves on.
Yeah, absolutely. Even when, reading about this news of all these very high profile films that were planned for major theatrical releases being moved to like HBO Max and like streaming services, whether it's, Dune, which is something I was so excited to go see, um, the new James Bond film, No Time to Die. All these films are being like pushed to the streaming services, which I think is interesting.
So it seems from my interactions with audiences, there's two kinds of audiences now. There's those who still have that big movie theater model, and they're looking for exciting movies in which a lot of things happen. But then there really does seem to be this growing audience for um, quiet, intimate human stories, which can involve blood and murder. It's fine. They're just shot and told in an intimate way. Uh, I, I sense that appetite is growing. And I think it will be eventually stronger because we communicate now on these devices. It'll be stronger than the appetite for huge movies where a lot of things happen.
I think you're right because I can remember even a few years ago before the pandemic going to like very, very small art house theaters in Los Angeles and seeing like the new Alejandro Jodorowsky film and the theaters sold out. And I'm looking around like, this is a really strange film and it's sold out. That's pretty awesome. So I think you're right. I think there is this cultural like yearning for art house, interesting, quirky cinema.
And people are lonely, Jordan, and we were lonely before, and now they're lonely even more. And so the more cinema can really speak to the human condition, lonely people, I'm a lonely person. I don't mean I'm physically lonely. I have friends and family, but there's an internal loneliness that comes with being a human being. If you create art for lonely people that says, yes, I understand that, they'll find it. Maybe it's the same as a musician. I think of the music that I gravitated to as a boy, which was, always the soulful stuff and the yearning stuff and the stuff that kind of broke your heart. I
Sure.
found it. I
Right.
remember looking at the record bins in those days, but I would look and look and look and look and look until I found what I was looking for. And I guess the equivalent today would be searching online for it.
Wow. What are some of your major references musically for things that you were inspired by early on or now?
James Taylor, but the early James Taylor,
Wow, it's a great one.
stuff like Something in the Way She Moves.
Yeah.
Because it's minor, it hardly resolves at all. And I hardly resolve it all. Stuff like that. Orchestrally, I love stuff like the pastoral from Handel's Messiah. Again, because it's all very yearning and it hardly resolves. Roberta Flack, her
Wow.
very first album was done with just her at the piano in a club. I think it was in D.C. and it mesmerized me as a child. It's the one that includes First Time I Ever Saw Your Face, but there's some other stuff on there too, like Trying Times. Um, yeah, solo artists mostly. That's odd. I hadn't thought about that. And the only sport I ever liked was boxing, and the only sport I ever did was boxing. And I like to hike and I like to swim. I guess I like all solo stuff.
Interesting. Those are great. Those are really phenomenal references, and I relate to the piece that you talk about, like the music that resonates with you mostly is like the yearning piece of it. I really do agree with that. Whether it's like Marvin Gaye or like so much of the soul kind of based music, I absolutely love, and I have this connection with, and I can't explain why, but that's the closest I could come. Like that yearning piece is is moving.
It's right. I guess it has something to do with, when we're young, we yearn more. But I also think that each of us, I think we really are born with a soul. And it's a particular soul to us. It has something to do with our genetics, I suppose, too. But there are things that resonate with us. And to find that thing that resonates with you, that's very sweet. I get mail from people sometimes, and they'll send me an email and they'll say, I watched this, what other people would call this really weird, extreme film that I'm in. And they say, oh, why would you do something like that? But someone will write and say, this made me cry, and it meant something to me. And it allowed me to access the darkness in me and to say, that's a part of me too, and it's okay. So thank you. And people will write. They'll take the time to seek out an actor and say those things. So you just
Yeah.
make the art that's in your soul, and people will find it.
That's a beautiful message, and particularly with so many pressures on a business level in entertainment, where you have managers and you have labels telling you, you have to do this because this is hot and this is what's going to get you on the radio, and you have all this influence coming from so many different directions. You often lose, what is moving to you. But if you remember, I think just that one sentiment, that one statement, that make the art that moves you, and people will find it. I think that's beautiful.
If I write something, would I like to read it? If I sing something, would I like to hear it? If I act in something, would I like to watch it? If the answer is yes, then okay. If it's not, do I really need this money? Sometimes you do.
Right. That's a great point. I encourage all artists to think about that more before, or why. Just asking themselves why. Like, is the reason I want to put this out because I want to be, an international superstar, or is it because this is something I have to say and I don't care what the result is? I have to say it.
What does fame even mean now? What does it even mean? What is the idea of celebrity? What does it mean?
Yeah.
Why? Why bother? Your soul is too precious. It's too precious. You want to be famous? Well, hell, there's a million ways you can be famous. And but why involve your soul in that? And yeah,
That's.
I've come to feel really strongly about that.
Do you think? Do you think your? I mean, I'm not sure what your particular spiritual faith is, but do you think having some sense of that, like, has helped you with navigating so much of the chaos of entertainment? Like, it's centered you, and I'm not particularly religious, but I do think I could see how that is incredibly useful for someone in entertainment. You know.
I hope that I'm not religious either, because I associate religion with hard ass mean people for the most part.
Oh,
But I believe that there are things that are bigger than myself. Um, but I have my doubts. But I believe. But I have my doubts. But I believe. That push and pull in and of itself is a great thing for an artist to have, because it keeps us from being cynical. It keeps us hopeful, but wondering, but hopeful, but wondering. I think you have to have both.
Wow, that's a great point. That's a really profound point. What yeah, I'm still thinking about that. That's pretty wild. I could.
And isn't it weird in an interview that we have to keep moving and asking and answering questions, but sometimes we just want to think? Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah,
But
I'm
thinking
trying to.
doesn't look good on camera.
Right, it's true. But there's so many things I want to ask you, but so much of what you're saying, I'm like, huh. I want to think about that for a second. um, yeah, that's a beautiful point. And when I see things like, even though I'm not, particularly interested in any specific religion, I will see stories about how someone like, Tom Cruise or John Travolta will find something of value in Scientology or whatever it may be. And even though I don't agree with it, I can understand, like, I see why that probably helps them. I can see it. Like, it probably centers them. It probably gives them something to sort of help navigate all the chaos. And I could definitely understand someone in
If
that
you're part
position.
of something bigger than yourself, anything that's bigger than yourself and that is noble and good, it can help to, make you less of a bitch. I don't know why I keep going back to that. Somebody must have called me that one time and it really stuck with me. But yeah, it's
It's
true.
true.
It
Yeah.
makes you less self-centered, which is always a
Yeah,
good thing in this business.
that's true. That's true. What film is coming out that you've been a part of that you're really excited to tell people about? Like, is there something specific that you want to let people know is coming out?
There's two. There's one called The Parish. I play a priest in it. Ostensibly, it's an exorcism film, a slow burn exorcism film, but really it's a film about grief and loss. And I'm proud of the work in that because I wanted to bring to my portrayal of this priest, I've never played a priest before, this mix of weariness and hope. It's a really sweet mix, and I've seen it in a lot of ministers that I've known personally. People want them to have answers, and they really don't. They're not sure about any of this stuff. They want to be sure. God, they want to be sure. But they're still not. Nobody can be sure. Nobody knows.
Right.
We're trying to navigate mysteries, and it's a hard gig, and I wanted to show that weariness and that hope. And I think it came across in that film, The Parish. And then there's one called Painkiller, which is from a director called Mark Savage. I did a movie with him, which this one is a sequel, called Stress to Kill, about a guy who has high blood pressure, and he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, geez, you got to get your blood pressure down. And he says, well, what do you do? And he says, well, you remove the things that irritate you in life. Well, the things that irritate this guy are people. So he starts taking them out, and his blood pressure does get really low. This is sort of a sequel to that. It's called Painkiller, and it's years later, and the guy's daughter has died of opioid abuse. So he starts wondering, who's going to do something to make these people pay who killed my daughter? Nobody is. So in sort of Charles Bronson fashion, he becomes an everyman vigilante. And I'm proud of the work in that because Mark is one of those directors that pushes you.
Wow.
So Painkiller will be out later this year too.
That's exciting. And I encourage, we're going to put up as much information as we can and moments, if it's all right with you, from stills from the films, and just kind of show people some of the incredible characters that you've done. And I feel like this is an inspiring note to end on. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time. This was a blast, and I'd love to have you back on if you'd like to come back on. And yeah, keep being an amazing inspiration to artists and actors alike.
This has been a breath of fresh air. I've done a lot of interviews this morning, but this has been the first conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Bill. This is awesome.
I hope to see you again, work with you in some capacity. I'm impressed with what you do, and I'm grateful for the chance to be with you.
I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have you back on. Have a great day, man.
Thank you, man. You too.